Wow, that came together quicker than I expected. Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Daryl Petrus. I'm the CEO of CAAIN, the Canadian Agri-Food Automation Intelligence Network, and it's my privilege to welcome you to the Future of Agriculture, an evening with Ted McKinney and Kim McConnell. For those of you who do not know CAAIN, who here, let's have a show of hands, who here doesn't know CAAIN? Well, let's be honest. Okay, you're getting the commercial. All right. For those of you who don't know us, we help connect, create, and cultivate, the 3 C's. By connect, we mean we're pulling together stakeholders, specifically in that digital ag tech space, and we are focused on assisting farmers, so that is the producers and the primary processors, with technology development and adoption. We connect that stakeholder community. We help create. We invest in ag tech projects, again, in the kind of digital space, more specifically robotics, automation, data-driven decision-making. So we do invest in technology specifically, and then we say we help cultivate. We help cultivate the development of a market by investing in smart farms. Smart farms are, without going into too much detail, farms that have the capacity to test technology against the industry standard, to validate and demonstrate, thereby proving to the producers that the technology can work in field or in barn. Now, not to go too much further, I want to get to the more formal part of our program. And to begin, I'd like to call on Collie Wood, the President and CEO of the National Circle for Indigenous Agriculture and Food, to come to the podium and acknowledge the original inhabitants of these lands. Collie, please.
You have to lean down, I have to pull it down, Daryl. So, Danse, good evening and bonjour. It is really a pleasure to be here, and thank you, hi Daryl, for the kind ask to welcome all guests from all 4 directions and to acknowledge the land that is now Ottawa. As a proud member of CAAIN Lakota Nation, I bring greetings from Treaty 4 territory in Saskatchewan. It was nice to come in and see that we had reserve seating. I felt very at home being on the reserve. So I'd like to start it a little lighter for the land acknowledgement, and I'd like you to repeat this after me. This will be something you're going to learn an Algonquin word today. It's Adawe. Adawe. Awesome. Yes. Very good. So that is the Algonquin term, and what it means is to trade, and that is where the word Ottawa came from. So the lands that Ottawa are built on are the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. It is important to recognize the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed and its tributaries. What was the name of Ottawa? Ottawa, yes. We honor the Algonquin relatives and their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory, and we uplift the voice and values of our host nation. So Ottawa, its meaning to trade. In this room of agriculture-related leaders, we gather to look, listen, and learn from one another, to trade ideas, best practices, and transfer of knowledge. Together, we are all stewards of this land for the next generations, our children, our grandchildren, and those not yet born. I encourage you to acknowledge our shared history, the oppression of lands, cultures, and the original peoples in what we now know as Canada. I encourage you here today, this week of events, and when you return to your homelands, to contribute to the healing and decolonizing journey we all share together. Welcome to Ottawa. Enjoy the week. Thank you. Hi, merci. And I look forward to spending the evening with you all.
Thank you so much, Collie. I would now like to take a moment to thank Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada for their belief in CAAIN and their ongoing financial commitment, really their collaboration. Their contribution has allowed us at CAAIN to leverage our ag tech investment to create $100 million worth of projects across Canada involving approximately 100 SMEs and supporting the maintenance or creation of approximately 150 highly qualified jobs. All this helps put much needed innovation in the hands of farmers and primary processors. Thank you, I said. I must also acknowledge the collaboration of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, as well as the generous in-kind support of Alberta Innovates. CAAIN is grateful to our sponsor, Farm Credit Canada, whose financial assistance helped make this evening possible. Finally, a big shout out to the Ottawa Food Bank for all you do to help the residents of Ottawa, especially those in need during these challenging times. And that shout out extends to all of you who donated. Thank you so much. Now I'll call on our board chair, Laura Kilcrease, to say a few words and introduce a special guest. Thank you, Laura.
He's so tall, but he's so good too. So good evening, everyone, and thank you, Daryl, for that kind and warm introduction. As chair of the Canadian Agri-Food and Automation and Intelligence Network, and CAAIN from now on, I also want to welcome everyone and not just thank you, but acknowledge the efforts you are making to be involved and to build bridges, connections, and learn tonight. By being here tonight, you're showing your true dedication to be part of a much broader community, which is part of our goal at CAAIN, to build the network of partners and supporters from all corners of Canada. And because of that, we want to foster these relationships as we go forward beyond this evening and over the next few days. You know, anyone can do a transaction. You can do a deal with anyone, a buy, sell, an investment, anything you want. This is not about transactions. This is about partnerships. And because this is about true partnerships, we are indeed going to tackle some of the toughest challenges that we're all facing in this very, very critical sector of agriculture and food. You know, I really also want to thank our star folks tonight, especially Ted McKinney. Ted, thank you for coming in. I know you had a long journey from overseas, and that was not just south of the border, but somewhere further away. And Kim McConnell, I'm truly looking forward to your insights because I think you guys have seen so much to talk about the future that we all need to understand is going to be important. But I'm not going to say too much more tonight other than to introduce our guest from the Government of Canada. It's my pleasure to introduce Parliamentary Secretary to the Ministry of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Francis Drouin. Mr. Drouin is certainly familiar with both agriculture and technology companies. Before joining the government, he worked in the private sector with Startup Canada, an organization that connects Canadian entrepreneurs and startups with supports, community partners, and resources they need to launch and grow their business. And I would like to say, when we talk about growing our businesses, folks, why don't we double down on our strengths and just fix the little problems we have? And I'm sure we'll find those later on tonight. This is the kind of work that CAAIN engages in, and is also a work I'm very passionate about, the startup, the agriculture, and what we can do together. I often say it's not a startup problem that we have in Canada, it's a scale-up problem. And it's where we need to go in the future and with our agricultural and innovation sectors. So after being elected to the government in 2015, Mr. Drouin has served as a member of various parliamentary committees, associations, and interparliamentary groups, including the Special Committee on the COVID-19 pandemic and the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, where he's advocated for local farmers and economic growth in rural areas. Mr. Drouin is an active member of the community in the riding of Glengarry, Prescott and Russell here in Ontario, and indeed he doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the talk by being the founder of the annual Francis Drouin Charity Golf Tournament in support of the United Way of East Ontario. Mr. Drouin, we cannot thank you enough for joining us tonight and joining the conversation and leading in to our other wisdom of the future. Please join me here.
You know, even after 8 years, one doesn't like to hear talking about oneself. It's still challenging. And I'm quickly reminded when I come back home who I am, so thank you so much. Distinguished guests, I do want to recognize Senator Black, who's in the room here, a great agricultural ally from the other house, and I don't know if there's other parliamentarians in here. But if you are here, stand up so I can recognize you. There you go, Larry McGuire as well down there. Nice to see you. It's a privilege to be here at the beginning of the Future of Food Conference this evening as we gather for our as you gather for the fireside chat with special guests Ted McKinney and Kim McConnell. You'll get to talk about a subject close to me and critical to our collective future, how technology can safeguard food security in our modern age. And while Canada's agri-food landscape differs from elsewhere, and I can just think about our European colleagues who have different challenges, not a lot of space, but need to increase output in Canada. The US, I would argue, we are truly still lucky to have a lot of space in our ecosystem, but that does bring different challenges. And we do share the same concerns that other developed nations across the world, such as workforce availability, carbon footprint reduction, and optimizing supply chains. And in the face of these challenges, let's choose proactiveness. Our response must embrace inclusivity, forward thinking, and innovation. Our government recognizes the agri-food sector's pivotal role in Canada's economy, and that's why we're committed to strategic actions across the supply chain, ensuring resilience and prosperity, and through opportunities like trade diversification and climate-smart technologies, we're transforming challenges into opportunities for growth. And by leveraging expertise, research, and precision agriculture, we're moving towards a more sustainably exportable farming solution. This initiative creates high-value jobs, boosts global competitiveness, and ultimately ensures food security for Canadians and beyond. And as we engage in today's discussion, let's remember the importance of collaboration between the private sector, academia, and government to foster innovation that will lead us into the future where agri-food sector is not only resilient, but thriving. Thank you for your unwavering commitment and for joining us in this critical conversation. Together, we're sowing the seeds for a future that is both prosperous and sustainable, and I'm sure, like all of you here, I'm looking forward to learning tonight. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary Drouin. We truly appreciate the support of the Government of Canada, and we're honored by your presence and that of your colleagues. Tonight, we're asking Ted and Kim to discuss where industry is and where it's headed, and perhaps to sprinkle a few stories along the way. Without taking up too much more of your time, gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Also on the other side there, okay.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Darryl. Thank you very much, CAAIN. Thank you very much, Farm Credit Canada, for hosting this discussion with us this evening. And thank you, audience, for attending. I see many friends in the audience tonight. I see many familiar faces. I must say that I'm delighted and I'm scared as hell. So much easier, isn't it, when you don't know anybody and just being able to have a talk? But
I don't know. I've been challenged on that. Okay.
When I was asked if I would moderate a discussion here, I asked the CAAIN group, well, who's the attraction? And I think we want to have somebody that we're going to have a talk to who's interesting, who's normally we wouldn't have an opportunity to dialogue with, who could maybe share some thoughts and some insights on things that would make us ponder and think. And also somebody that could have a session that would be enjoyable and set us up for tomorrow and Canada's Agriculture Day and the future of food. So when it was agreed that Ted McKinney was going to join us, I thought, now this is a great choice. Now, my job is that I'm going to be the interviewer. And hopefully I'm going to ask questions that each of you could say, well, I wouldn't mind asking them that question as well. And we're going to have a robust discussion. Now, I'm sure as hell not Oprah. But we'll see what we can do. And we're going to take about 60 minutes here. And we'll see if we can cover a bunch of ground. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to get started. So first off, welcome, Ted.
Thank you, Tim.
Start off by telling us, who is Ted McKinney? And give us a little brief background of who you are and what you've done.
Wow. This is not my favorite topic, but okay, you've asked. Well, I'm a farm kid from Indiana. Our family has always had some of the typical I-state kinds of crops, soybeans and corn all our lives. For 40 years, we raised seed corn for Pioneer. That's converted now to seed soybeans for Pioneer, but that's very much a part of who I've been. I've got a twin brother that manages all the farms. We have different birthdays. He's a day earlier. I'm 28 hours later, so figure that one out. And then an older brother by a year who spent 40 years with John Deere, and a younger sister 12 years younger that was Kellogg and now with Pfizer. So we've sort of got the value chain covered. I'm lucky. Mom and Dad, both Purdue University grads, and though there was always work to do on the farm, homework always came first. And they never got in the way of activities. In our case, it was 4-H and FFA, football, basketball. So we got to grow up like anybody else, even though there was always work to do out in the backyard. We're blessed with really rich soils there, and so yields are great. We've always been very technologically sound. Even today, we're doing a beta test in the nation on strip tilling, and we're taking off the equipment the manufacturer provided and putting on our own because we're precision planting dealers, and we're trying to integrate technology all together so that we're not having a John Deere system, a CAAIN system, a precision planting system, a Cargill system. So that's a quick snapshot. But we're very progressive in the farm, and I enjoy it very much. I still get back.
So after university, what'd you do?
Well, I was going to go back and farm. My twin brother and I both majored in ag economics, and I minored in agronomy thinking I'd have the crops. He minored in animal sciences thinking he'd do the livestock. But that was not a good time to go back and farm, if you remember. Interest rates were way out of this. But Tom he was going to farm, so help me. He was the farmer. I liked it. I loved it many times. But a combination of having been very active on the Purdue campus, and I was engaged at the time, and allergies and things probably weren't going to be Julie's thing. So we said, I'm going to try the corporate sector because it's easier to do that and go to farm if you decide to do that than the reverse. And I came to like the corporate sector and never looked back, and it was just as well. Tom's a really, really capable farmer, and he didn't need me to guide, lead, point, coach.
So you were a senior executive. You worked your way up with Dow Elanco.
Right.
And then you started doing some lobbying work or something. Tell us about this and how you got connected and where you went.
It's funny. I coach a lot of young people because I was a sales rep, selling Treflan, for those of you that know Treflan, for goodness sake. And then a first cousin to that. Got as far north as Mankato, Minnesota. So I had some flavor of the weather that you all up here get. And went back, I was in marketing, and I was ready to take that next job, which is where you could spring out to do international, you could do district manager, and I'll be darned if the Lilly corporate folks didn't come and say, we think you might be just perfect in the corporate affairs world. And they'd sort of seen some things, and I thought, well, so I prayed a lot about it with my wife, because I'm leaving the home ship, I'm leaving my culture, I'm leaving all this. But it was the start of my life's work in what I call government public affairs. And it's a very honorable profession. I cringe when people label lobbyists as bad people, because if you're honest and ethical and transparent, you're adding a lot to agriculture. So did that, and was 20 years with what became Dow AgroSciences, a precursor. And I finally got the business opportunity that I wanted, which was to lead a global corporate affairs group. So I went back to Lilly, to Elanco Animal Health. This is veterinary animal products company, and did that for 4 years. And then this guy named Pence called me and said, I want you to be my director of ag. I had come to know Mike and Karen Pence because we traveled the same flights, and we really prayed because that was an enormous, enormous pay cut. But that's when you find out what really trips your trigger, and public service was in my future, and so we took the pay cut and went back, and who'd have thought that a 757 with Trump on the side of it would come to Indianapolis and recruit my former boss to Washington, and I sort of followed him there, and here we go. Here we go.
So we'll get into that in a little more
Yeah.
detail, but
Yeah.
that gives you the setting. We got a farm boy who come up through the corporate world, did the government end of things, got to be in the big White House, got to work in some of those things. So we got a lot of stuff that we're going to cover here. Now, let's start by the world.
Yeah.
When you look at the world today, we'll get into the world of agriculture, but when you look at the world today, what do you see the key things that are driving the world today?
Yeah. Well, I think populism is on one hand a joy because you take pride in the country you're in. You know, populism is make America great again. How else can I say it, right? You may have your own monikers. And in one element, that's great because you're supposed to take a certain pride. But I think it's starting to become detrimental because as I traipse around the world, I did about 500,000 million international air miles. I see populism rising, and with that comes I can go it alone. I can be self-sufficient. And the fundamentals of Ag Economics 101 says, let those who are the most efficient in the volume, quality, and safety of something produce, and then you trade. Imagine that. And I think the world is losing this. It's not just the U.S., it's not just Canada. I think we're slipping. I would have to add to that we are now 3 to 6 generations from Grandpa on the farm, and we've forgotten where our food comes from, and we've taken it for granted. I really believe there's a big element of that. You know, when 1 or 2% of us farm in your country and mine, and I think there's a lot of value. Farmers and vets, I think, are still among the highest viewed, most respected people, so there's some good that comes, but they've lost. People think your food comes from Walmart or Kroger or whatever your local store is, and so I think that's a big element today. I also think that as we've seen countries rise and fall, as we have seen for the millennia, you see some flexing of the muscle, puffing out of the chest, and with that comes egos, and I think that is probably setting in more than one country, unfortunately.
We've just gone through COVID.
Yeah.
Have we got a hangover?
Yes. Yes, we do. I don't think there's much good that came from COVID, particularly when you look at the deaths that occurred. So let's just set that out there very big. I suppose the one thing that might be good that came out of it is that we learned we can communicate in many ways, Teams and Zoom and all those things. I think there is some good that has come from that. But if anything like yours, if I've read it once, I've read it many times, that some politicians, not all, would say never lose the opportunity to take advantage of a crisis. And when you do that, oh my gosh, sometimes it might be for the good, but more often than not, it takes it to extremes. And I'll give you an example. We're battling on our farm bill now on how much more do we give in nutrition. Well, we Aggies are so proud that we're taking our largesse, our excess, and providing food for kids before they go to school. But we shot that amount up, and now we feel like we have to sustain it even though we're now back to some sense of normalcy. And so as a fiscal conservative, I say, wait, what's the parent's responsibility here? Do we do a pre-breakfast and then breakfast and then a mid-morning snack and then lunch and then after school? And oh, by the way, now we're doing weekends. And oh, by the way, we need to do it for family. And then, oh, by the way, there's a summer. And I want people to be fed. I believe so much in nutrition. I've been very active in the food banks of Indianapolis. But I have to say, gosh, are we going too far? Are we just saying this has become a government responsibility and not a family or a parental responsibility? So I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think that's one hangover. And then just the amount of money that was spent. Oh, I suppose it's a good. I think we're coming out of our risk of a recession. And maybe there was a lot of good that I just don't even know about, given my my econ background. But I think many of us think, wow, we way overspent. That's what led to some inflation.
Some interesting times. When you look at the world of agriculture,
Yeah.
what's driving that?
Well, I still think innovation is. I think there's an element of parts of the world, I'd lead with Europe, who were just over the top on food safety. For a time, there was a pivot to food security. Ukraine's attack, Russia's attack on the Ukraine and other strife around the world. I hope we can go a little bit more back to that food security worry. I've got a PowerPoint presentation called The Power of And my worry about that, Kim, is that we're so into climate agriculture and the climate change and climate change mitigation, a good thing, but it's all-consuming, a little like COVID was all-consuming. Anything and everything that we could throw against the wall to address COVID, we did. And I think that's a little bit what we're doing with climate. We can address climate and increase productivity. But when I look at the likes of Europe as the best example, oh my God, they were going to mandate 25% of the arable land go to organic. Now, I'm supportive of organic. I lifted a lot of farmers up in organic. But when you mandate that, productivity, as our Economic Research Service said, is going to go down precipitously. France and Germany become net importers. Who's producing the grains and the meats for the world that can't afford that and needs that? So I worry about some of I'm singularly focused on one thing and nothing else. I think we can walk, chew gum, and maybe rub our tummy at the same time, but we don't seem to be doing that. So that's a worry of mine, is this singular focus and everything else, to hell with it.
So what about when you look at the war situation, the things that are going on in other parts? What are your comments on that? How do you see that through the eyes of agriculture?
Well, I'll start by saying not healthy. It is not healthy at all. Outside of my ag world, I'm a World War II buff. I have read a lot. My wife reminds me, Ted, the outcome is the same, don't you? Yeah, but there's something to learn from that battle. Well, you look at what's shaping up, it's not so dissimilar. Annex a part of another country, make the claim that it's part of the homeland originally. Where have we seen this before? That's very, very risky. So I worry about that, and some of this populism that feeds that don't make for a nice, good mix. So as it pertains to agriculture, it just plain disrupts trade. Populism rises, you shut off markets, you close ports. The Black Sea might be the best example. We know that China is nosing in, or trying to, in a lot of the ports of the Western Hemisphere. Who knows where that will go? Maybe they'll trade successfully and fairly. I've got my doubts on that, given past performance. And so when you disrupt trade, you enhance hunger. And then when that happens, when there is war and strife, instead of saying, let's share and lift the boats for everybody, countries decide, let's close the border. I'm going to hoard, those are not the words they'll use, but I'm going to hoard my wheat. I'm going to keep all the wheat for my own. Well, then the prices shoot up, and it just adds hunger and price, and it's just very disruptive. So I'm a free trader of the first order. I'm proud to do that. But gosh, we're seeing more and more people looking insular and saying, nah, we're going to be great. We're going to focus on our people. And oh my gosh, that's not healthy in any shape.
Yeah. You talked about technology and the importance of technology and where it plays. And let's talk a little bit more about the role of agriculture in that. And we're hosted tonight, Ted, is with CAAIN, who's driving adoption of digital ag technology, and that's good. But where does AI, where does CRISPR, where do the digital technologies fit, and what makes you excited about that part of agriculture?
Oh, it is so positive and so exciting. Frighteningly so, just because of the awe and the power that brings. Let me give you an example. This precision planting business that we have on the farm, we're just a distributor. I was in the tractor with twin brother Tom, because he always runs the planter, and we're like any other planter these days. There's about 3 or 4 monitors there, and it was the first pass in the field. And the iPad showed when the seeds were 1/4 of an inch lower than desired or a quarter of an inch higher. And you know that because of the down pressure with your hydraulics. When we finished the pass, there were a number of dots. And he said, Ted, the statistics that we've shown, the algorithms are showing that would be a yield loss of about 15 bushel per acre. Now you multiply that times 5,000 or 6,000 acres and that'll add up. We applied some down pressure on the return trip, no spots. And that's because they're placing that seed exactly where it needs to go. I'm so proud. I've talked to Greenpeace and I've talked to the Greens of Germany about what we've done. We're down 19% in our fertilizer use because we soil sample every 5 feet, about every 2 or 3 years, and we marry that up to a satellite, so we have variable rate technologies, and mostly we're down on phosphorus. It's easy to overapply phosphorus on hilly areas that don't need it. We're saving, we're doing exactly what Farm to Fork wants, but with no penalties and no regulations. We're down our insecticides. We fought through 2 years of fall armyworm because we had biotech corn and we had neonic-treated seeds. And that alone got us through. And in Africa and China, they're just fighting this horrific worm with all the chemistries you can imagine because they can't control it. This is the positive. Now you're getting into digital, and I know CAAIN is focused on that, and that is just so exciting. The whole digital age, I don't think we can really grasp yet. One thing we're trying to do at NASDA is recognize that Deere has its portfolio and its repository for data that comes off of a C&Say sprayer or a John Deere planter. Case IH has the same. Cargill and ADM, as you are a client of theirs, have their data. And we're trying to work on how we bring all this together. So we're doing a project right now. It's relatively simple, but we're trying to analyze through SAS Institute of the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina how to do a better job on antimicrobial resistance and One Health. And it's because there's all these pockets of data. A university here has one, a big farmer there has one, another university has one, diagnostic labs have another. We got to bring it together so we can really analyze it. And I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen.
And then you throw CRISPR and what we can do from the genetics things, it sort of blows your mind, doesn't it?
Yes, and yet, you know, as my love of history, if you go back, we've seen this in a different form before. When Cyrus McCormick developed the reaper and John Deere his plow, and then came tractors. I understand the horse lobby didn't like that very much, but inevitably it was better. And then when we electrified rural America, and I think Canada for the most part did the same thing, and then hybrid seed corn. Most people don't know that hybrid seed corn was not automatic. What? No, cross? No. It took a couple generations. Finally, we see the value of hybrid seeds. So each of these takes a while to adapt. So is biotech, so will AI, so will all the next gen things that we haven't thought about. But I think eventually wisdom prevails, results show, and we're going to get there.
Yeah. Now, you were the former Undersecretary of Agriculture from 2017 to 2011, or 2021, I'm sorry. And Sonny Perdue was the Secretary of State. And you were one of the undersecretaries during the Trump administration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Now, what were your responsibilities? What did you do?
Well, this was the first time there had been that job. My predecessor was the undersecretary that had all the domestic programs, those in the U.S. that would know the Farm Service Agency. They had the Farm Service Agency, and they also had the other FAS, the Foreign Ag Service. And the 2014 Farm Bill allowed for a secretary, if they wanted, to divide those, to make 2 undersecretaries, so you had somebody focused internationally and somebody focused domestically. And I was lucky to get the international job, which fit my interest. Unfortunately, we just lost, very suddenly, my counterpart. It was right across the hall. Bill Northey was the undersecretary for the domestic programs, and he died last Monday. And so we divided it. So my role was basically to go promote U.S., and I talked about a lot of things that we would share, but promote products internationally. Codex was also a part of my portfolio. It had been with the Food Safety Inspection Service, and it was good there, but they really operated their own. We took it and said, let's apply some muscle. Let's apply some muscle. Never compromise science. Codex is a science-based system globally that's just a dream. But we applied some muscle to say, let's go try to enforce some of these things, but keep science pure,
Neat.
and it worked.
Neat. You probably worked in a fairly interesting environment,
Yes.
being at that crowd.
Yes.
We'll get into that in a few minutes, but how did you get the job?
You know, I don't really know. I know this, the directors, secretaries, and commissioners of ag, and I was the director in Indiana, are usually the AAA ball club into those positions. At least it's a place you look. So I'm guessing there's that. I do know that my boss then, Governor Pence, twice said, you might want to think about changing your zip code. So he probably had something to do it. But I was also later told that they really gave Secretary Perdue a lot of freedom to operate and hire who he wanted. And he did a marvelous job placing talents where they really fit well. So somewhere in that mix, probably with a lot of luck, I dropped a few $100 bills around Washington, D.C., hoping somebody'd notice that. Maybe that helped too, but we found our way to a USDA.
That's good. So when you were there 4 years. What the hell did you accomplish?
That's a great question. Well, here's what I hope I accomplished. I know we opened up trade, and I'll get to China in just a moment. I was worried that the rhetoric that comes from a campaign, things like Make America Great Again or America First, that would be taken literally internationally. And so every visit with a minister of ag or a vice minister or an undersecretary, I always led with, I am here to work as hard or harder for you than you will work for me. And I lived up to it. I really, really worked hard at that. And that was a lot of communication. Oftentimes, it was not me working to get their ag products in because they were not going to be near able to match the size, the largesse, the scope of U.S. So I introduced them to the Pentagon. You know, one country wanted some F-16 aircraft. All right, I'll introduce you to the Pentagon. So we did that. So I think after a while, it wasn't the first visit, but the second or third visit, they realized, hey, this guy's serious. We had to be tough. We had some programs that were basically tax credits to incent people to try out some U.S. product. I think Canada has similar programs. And in a couple countries, we took it away. They were taking advantage of us, and then they were going off and giving favor, whether it's soybeans or corn or whatever it was, to another country. And so after you do that, much like a child, you know, when you learn, you know, Dad said no, I better learn no, they came around. I will not name the country, but one was really, really playing funky with all of the world on fruit imports. We learned later there was some graft under the table stuff. And so later when the European Union finally upset this country so much over their forestry practices, they said, we want your dairy. Out with them, in with yours. And so there are payoffs to this. So I'd like to think that within the boundaries of existing trade agreements, not new ones, not renewed ones, but in the existing boundaries, I'd like to think that we set back some order. And at least I was respectful about it.
Well, if you look at this, though, Ted, U.S. agriculture is slipping. You know, you were the powerhouse. You were the world's powerhouse in many of these areas. Today, you represent less than a third of the global soybean business. You're fourth in wheat. Your ag deficit in September was $19 billion. By the end of this year, they're expected to be $28 billion. What the hell's going on?
Good question. Well, I would say this. I think some would argue with that because you look at leadership in a different way. It's not just, are you number one in soybeans and corn and pork and beef and all that. I hope it goes beyond that. For example, I think we still stand very strong with the Codex Alimentarius. It is usually, and I'll give a lot of credit to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. I mean, Canada is right there with us and oftentimes leads because it's not always wise for the U.S. to lead those things. And so we have kept the EU at bay on some of their desire to open up the sacred principles of Codex, which looks at food safety, and sort of introduce animal welfare, and then sustainability, which is anybody's definition these days. And so, but it's true, and it's because I don't think we have chased aggressively enough what I would call an FTA, a free trade agreement. We straightened out the old, a little bit about China. I think we did the world some good by standing up and saying, look, you're undermining free trade, your state-owned enterprises are not even opaque. You don't even know what they're doing. And there's all kinds of subsidies going into a lot of things that we as democracies can't do and can't afford to do. So many people look at the China Phase 1 agreement, which some would say, well, you didn't include Canada. Well, I hope that some of the effect helped Canada. But Mr. Trump said, look, this is not fair, and so slapped some pretty heavy tariffs. Well, we started negotiating, and it was very successful about 2/3 of the way, and all of a sudden, the backsliding occurred. And so he doubled the tariffs again. Now, you can argue whether that was the right thing to know or not. It was certainly a gutsy move, and then they came back and we finished it up. And I think out of that, never mind whether it was raw sales of commodities or ethanol or meats or whatever, the value of that was that we opened up 3,300 to 3,400 plants in the U.S. And I mean a pork processing plant, a dairy processing plant, a soy, because they had slowly been shutting them off. And I think they were doing some of that here as well. And
So
we
what
brought
is-
that open.
So what is the message to Canada? What's the lesson that the Canadians can learn from things like this?
I think coalitions is where it's at, and there's no better coalition than Canada and the U.S., and on most days I'll include Mexico, although we got to straighten out a corn decree down there. And I think that's the value of USMCA. The language in USMCA, much of it, doesn't exist on any other trade agreement. It's the only place you'll find biotechnology stated clearly in how we're going to act. So it's all about coalitions, which is what we've learned through Codex. And I think a lot of that's shaping up. There's the Five Eyes in the security area. It's no different in our world, and we've got to stick together because no one of us is as strong as all of us.
So we're going to talk in a minute about relationships, the Canada-U.S. relationship. But before we do that, the U.S. Farm Bill is, where are we? Give us an update.
Well, maybe you haven't read about it, but there's some divisiveness going on in our Capitol Hill. Yeah, that's a very true statement. I'm not here to chastise either side because both are very strong in their beliefs, and they want to do right by what they think is correct, and we just can't come together. A lot of this we've done to ourselves. Our electorate, we the voters, have said, I'm going to go with the strongest to the right or the strongest to the left, and we've cut out the middle. Many of you might remember my U.S. Senator, Dick Lugar, one of the finest statesmen you've ever met. Someday he'll get the Nobel Peace Prize by how many atomic warheads he got destroyed when he and Sam Nunn did the Nunn-Lugar Act in terms of that. But at any rate, he was beating the primary. He wasn't far right enough. And so I think we've sort of, it's like eating your young, you know, you build this trap, and all of a sudden, if you're not hard right or hard left, you're not going to get elected. And I think some of that's going on now. It's the middle that always elects somebody. But until you get through that primary, you better be righter than right or more left than left, and this is what we're seeing.
Are we going to get a deal on the Farm Bill?
I hope so. I hope so. I still am a glass half full kind of guy. I'm still an optimist. Right now, we've got to get appropriations done to run the government, and that's taking longer than we would like. I'm hoping that they're right when they say we can get it done by March, although they've been off by a couple months, 3 months every time. If that can get done by March, there is barely enough floor time to get the Farm Bill done in an April, May. After that, what I call the silly season of elections just takes over, and we're looking to probably go to after the election. And then here's my forecast. If it's still a tight vote and we have a fairly divided government, they'll probably do something in the lame duck session between November and when the new president takes over or Mr. Biden continues, whatever happens. If one side or the other takes control, I think we're going to see a farm bill after the swearing in of a new Congress. And none of it is good. Now, for farmers there, it's not like it blows up everything. Funding is just kicked down the road. You sustain these things. But many of you don't know that government is not allowed to plan past the point in time where there's funding. Right now, the Foreign Ag Service, Kathleen, cannot plan any time past September. Well, you can't build and run a ship or a program or a train or a farm that way. You need to plan. But it's very strict. Do that on the sly and you're in trouble. So we have created this system. We're victims of it. It's still probably the best in the world in terms of looking at the options of autocracies, but we're in a fix. We're in a pickle.
We're in a pickle. You talked a few minutes ago about Europe.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you have any additional comments on that.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Go ahead.
Both sets of parents came from Europe. I love Europe. It's where I like to go vacation. I love the people. If you go through the agriculture, there's none more beautiful. Their Green Deal and their Farm to Fork, which is the ag piece of Green Deal, the objectives, I think are fabulous. We would have written them, any of us. It's when they get the tactics, it's an oh my God factor. Oh. What they've done, I think, and if they just wanted to do it for their own, I feel for the farmer there, and we're now seeing the pushback. Tractorcades in Paris, Barcelona was last Monday, The Hague, etc. I think they're well-intended. I do. I think they're well-intended, given the objectives, but they're so regulatory-minded. Maybe it's because of the rise and the strength of the NGO and the more strident activists. I don't mind activists. I think there's a lot of value there, but the more strident activist says, there's only one way to do it, and it's my way. Well, that leads to the same problems as the divisiveness we're seeing in Congress. And so, I kept thinking that the pendulum was going to swing and stop swinging and come back to some sense of normalcy. And maybe we've hit that with these tractorcades and the collapse in Parliament of their intent to ban half the pesticide arsenal of the world. And then President Ursula declared that, yes, we're not going to pursue that. Now, I know the EU, and you know the EU. They'll come back. And they'll be over here saying, look over here, what we're doing. Look at this aspirational. Meanwhile, over here, they're going to screw you and us both. And so I hate that. And so part of the reason I didn't go back to Indianapolis to 2 wonderful job options was because I could not let that happen. You know, nobody has the farm background and the state government and the federal government, the international and the domestic. And I just thought, my public service, I better say what I mean. So I'm worried where they're going to go, but at least we've got some breathing room, and this is where we all have to come together. That's why I had a wonderful visit to agri-food and agriculture and agri-food Canada today, and that's why we're doing so much more international work as NASDA. I mean, we've always been a states to DC to states organization, and we are really spending time internationally because we've got to raise our voice. We have to, Chris.
Let's before we get into some of that part, let's just talk for a few minutes on sustainability. How important is sustainability to the U.S. and to the U.S., the agriculture in the U.S.? How important is it?
Very, very. Now, sustainability can mean, we know, a lot of different things. I think that agriculture, particularly farmers, look at it as, do you leave the soil and the crops and the critters in a better state than what you found them? That's what my grandfather and my father always taught me, and I think we do that. I think we do that. But we have outsiders coming in saying, and by the way, we should be open to outsiders. You know, sometimes we can get myopic. I don't want to suggest that all is wrong from the outside. But when people come in and just say, yep, it's those cattle, methane, that's the problem with climate change. Get rid of the cattle and, well, problems will go away. Oh, come on. It's not that simple. So I think we've got to tell our story better. We've got to keep adopting technology, but I think technology will take care of that, at least in production ag, fairly short order. Some of these technologies, Darryl, we talked about this, are unbelievable. I just had a company that came in and said they have a device in the soil that from your iPhone, real time measures CO2 and NOx emissions at that moment. Well, to heck with all these models that we're using to pay farmers. Let's go with technology like that. So I'm very bullish on that. But right now, we've got to all be sustainable. I'll tell you what I tell PepsiCo and Exxon and Chevron and General Mills, and I'm not just making those names up. I've said you've got to get a competent farmer that knows what they're talking about. Don't just go find your friend. Get somebody who knows their net worth, that knows their financials, that can be an agronomist, a vet, a mechanic, that can be a computer specialist. Get those people, and they'll tell you what will work for them. Because remember, sustainability is a three-legged stool, not a two-legged stool, not a one-legged stool. And part of that is they've got to be profitable. And too often these think tanks and these companies, they mean well. They really do, but they oftentimes forget that business about, oh, yeah, the farmer's got to make money, right?
I think we maybe.
So I think we're going to get there.
I think maybe we could add in that third one too, is that, you know, sustainability of rural communities is pretty damn important too.
Amen to
and
that.
if we don't have hockey rinks and basketball courts and some of those other things in the community, we're not going to have too many farmers in those areas
Right.
too.
Well, Kim,
so,
let me give you another
So
example.
we have to look after the environment, the financial, and the community and the social.
We do, and I think that is going on. I mean, right now, this spring, we'll move about another 500 acres to strip till because it's no or low till, and yet that ridge warms up and we'll reduce the use of our chemistry and our fertilizer. I got to add one that does pertain to both Canada and us, and I think that's the Proposition 12 out of California that's mandating all kinds of space requirements for livestock and poultry. First of all, the Department of Ag didn't do that. That's the voters that did that. And we're being very respectful. But if California keeps this up, I think it's going to have a drastic effect. We know now, many small farmers, small pig farmers are going out of business. This was the last straw. We cannot make it with that requirement, and that requirement investment, we can't do it. So we're helping California understand you may have thought you did the right thing, but all this rhetoric you have about keeping and growing the small farmer, well, here's your data. Here's your data. You've driven many out, and it'll continue. So these are the kinds of things we've got to do, and if we can just get them to sit down with people who are knowledgeable, like I just advised on the sustainability with the large corporate member, I think we can be okay. It'll not be easy, but I think we can be okay.
We often, as we read here or watch here in Canada and look at the Republicans and the Democrats and them fighting back and forth and the whole works, you sometimes get the sense that the Republicans aren't as interested in some of this.
I don't think that's correct. I think they care about it in a different way. I don't think they want to race pell-mell to hell with anything else to get it done. It's done more carefully. On our own farm, we didn't race right out to strip till the moment it came out. We have been but we did make the progression to no-till and minimum till. And then as we've studied that and learned about it, now we're going to make that transition to strip till. So it's a progression. You know, some who are more earnest, I've got to solve the problem now. Some of the climate objectionists that are stopping traffic, all the kinds of really folks that want something done right now. Agriculture's never been that. Yeah. So we've got to help them understand that we are getting there, and we're proud to do so.
Water's a big issue.
Yes.
Drought, but also water in
Yes.
lots of. What are your thoughts on water and where the U.S. is going on water?
Well, there's two aspects. NASDA was very deeply involved when we got into the waters of the U.S., the WOTUS discussion. This was when the federal government was saying, we have responsibility for navigable waters, which most people would think you put a boat or something down. It's not a creek, it's not a dry drainage ditch. So the overreach there was dramatic, and we raised hell. I mean, our Democrats and Republican members of my organization just raised hell and said, no, you're not. And the Supreme Court finally decided with us. The states have a lot of responsibility and proud of it. So who manages it is one aspect. Now, let me bring in your others. I think we are learning things that we should have probably started practicing years ago on things like drip irrigation, the realization that maybe a certain part of the U.S. should not be producing crops. Maybe there's something better there. And so I think we're sorting through that now, but it's going to be very tense in our western U.S., just as I think it will be in some of western Canada or the drier areas of your country. There's a lot to learn out there. The Israelis, for example, are just unbelievably proficient in water usage. So I think we can get there, but it too is going to be a heavy lift, and some tough decisions are going to be made.
Let's look at the Canada-U.S. relationship. You know, for forever,
Yes.
we've been locked at the hip. We've been singing from the same song sheet.
Yeah.
I sense that maybe we're slipping a little bit here. How, in your mind, is the relationship between Canada and the States today?
I think it's very good, but I'll get to the differences in a moment. I put it in that category when I said earlier that we can take for granted the good things we have. I think some of that may have set in on both sides. We probably upset you all with how direct we were in USMCA. NAFTA was working, in most cases, pretty good. I think we've upgraded it with some additional language, but that probably upset you in Mexico. All right, give the U.S. a black mark or two. And then how dairy was implemented here has really not set well. We felt betrayed. We feel betrayed. But we're hoping the system will show whether we were right or whether we were wrong, or maybe there was a misjudgment in how it was signed. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But I hope we're trying to play ball under the rules. But I'm spending time reminding people of all the good things that are going on. Now, let me tell you what I have said, and I use this with Europe more than I do Canada. The Europeans are very good about putting their arm around your shoulder and say, oh, we are friends. Look, we're NATO. We trade so much. Most of your relatives came from here. We're buddies. And I say, yes, we have been. But I said, I don't want to hear that from you anymore. This is Europe. Until we get some things fixed, you're just playing the games of hiding that kind of thing. Well, I don't think that's going on with Canada and the U.S. You can be upset about our forest pine issues just as we might with your dairy, and we're starting on this trip of product of the USA with the beef business. It's not so different, but there's changes that leave everybody unsettled. I think we got to continue the dialogue, which is what we have done. And I got to tell you, you send the best to your embassy in Washington, and we certainly, Mary Ellen, where are you? We send the very best of the Foreign Ag Service up here. Very reasonable. And we're going to get through this, but I think we're going to have to work through it.
How can it be improved? What can we do on our end to make it better?
Well, we'll make sure to take care and still allow your livestock to come down and back and forth if you'll fix dairy. How's that? Can you commit to that, Kim?
I probably can't, but maybe some others can. I don't know. Let's change here.
That was a trial close,
yeah.
y'all, but a friendly one.
Yeah. If President Trump is reelected, do you have any insights on what this might mean to Canada?
Overall, I think it is good because he's more interested in straightening out other parts of the world than he is one of his prizes, which is the USMCA. Oh, he'll hear a lot about dairy. Trust me, that will come up. I'll guarantee you if he's elected, that will come up. And I suspect it will with Biden as well. So that'll be something you can work on. But similarly, we have things to work on too. I can't say it's a two-way street and then not make it a two-way street. And that's why we're working hard. Just this week, I took time out of our very busy conference to meet with a bunch of folks from Mexico and your Canadian cattlemen about this product of the USA, which I think is still going to be voluntary. I'm not so worried about it, but I am going to go look into it. I'm going to ask the people at CAAIN to say, what's this business about Mr. Secretary Vilsack making an announcement in March? What is it going to say? Don't forget, you all have a WTO penalty that's lingering out there from our attempts at this on round one, our cool, which most of ag believes was very misguided. I must tell you that. I am one of them, and most people agree with me. So you got that big, heavy, I'm a Purdue Boilermaker, that hammer, you know. Boilermaker Pete has a hammer. I think you have that hammer. I'd make sure people know that. But I think that's not going to be quite the issue. So I hope Mr. Trump will join with whoever's in leadership here at the time, if he's elected, and come together. And I hope the same for Mr. Biden if he is reelected. Right now, we're not doing much on trade, and boy, oh boy, that rhetoric is going to rise.
One of the things that Mr. Trump has said, he's spoken about a 10% tariff on all imported goods. Canada's pretty important, or the U.S. is pretty important to Canada. 10%, that's going to hurt. What suggestions, how do you suggest as a diplomat that we best handle this?
Swallow hard and run the other way. No, it won't be that easy. Mr. Trump is an excellent negotiator where there's the noise, the bravado, and then, you can negotiate something more reasonable. I don't know if this is all of that. I suspect there is some truth there. I think he's getting at more, and for those that haven't, you probably need to buy the book that Bob Lighthizer, who was our U.S. trade representative. And if you only want the CliffsNotes version, go to the last chapter. That really explains what I think is also Mr. Trump's philosophy. And I think it'll settle your nerves a little bit, not entirely. I was in the Roosevelt room when we all got to discuss the final discussion on steel aluminum tariffs, and we put the heavy on you. We walked out of the room knowing that only one country was going to get it, and it was not yours. We were not the last whisper in the ear. So you don't know about that, but that's why we've got to make sure we are so integrated and so strong and so important to each other that that message prevails over, I'm going to get even on irritation X or irritation Y. Okay. And watch out on dairy. I think that's real.
You got to sit in the same office every once in a while with President Trump. Can you share some stories? Come on, we're interested.
Yeah. Well, there's a very, very different side to Mr. Trump. I have seen him be so very respectful and genteel with people. I've seen him probe to elicit. Frankly, it was a lot of the China discussion when we brought a lot of people I knew in, and it was actually in the Vice President's office. So I've seen a side that the media I don't think is going to ever show you, because that's not their narrative, So there is that side, and he's smart as a whip, holy smokes, and he loves agriculture and farmers. So if we can knit those three things together, I think it will do well.
Why does he love farmers and agriculture?
Well, I think a lot of it is the same work ethic that he grew up with. Even though he was born into some wealth, he worked like a dog. I mean, he is in many ways self-made. Now, if we all got our first million, maybe we could all be as well. But, and remember, he's a junkyard dog, real estate guy from Manhattan, of all places. You better be tough doing that. And so I think the adversity that farmers face, the uncertainties they face, all those things, he was just very attracted. I don't think he missed a Farm Bureau annual meeting. In fact, I don't think Secretary Perdue ever spoke as Mr. Trump was speaking to them. So if he has a love of agriculture, and we're cinched at the hip, using your words, I think he's got other places he's going to focus on before he goes to try to do corrective interviews or corrective actions in Canada. But I don't know that. We're working to make sure what we have in USMCA is seen as a prize and one to be cherished and developed.
Good message there. Sonny Perdue and the president appeared to be on very good terms. Is that correct?
I think it is. My observation of Secretary Perdue was that way. More of what I learned came when we were at the British Embassy. It was the night that Boris Johnson was elected, so, a lot of people there, and I will not name the person, but it was a cabinet member, fairly influential cabinet member. I introduced myself, and he says, you're the guys we don't have to worry about. Again, you're the folks we don't have to worry about. I said that too quickly. Well, that was pretty comforting. Now, part of that's because he had other things that he really wanted to go work on, but it also said a lot about the trust he had in Secretary Perdue. And I think Mike Pence, who was sort of the initial ag guy until Secretary Perdue came along, Indiana's a good ag state. Pence can hold his own on ag discussions, and I think that was probably some coaching he was giving as well. So we're grateful to all of it.
So President Biden and Secretary Vilsack seem to also be in very good, very close. When we look at our country, often we see are agriculture leaders not necessarily connected at the highest level, like you see Sonny Perdue and Trump or Vilsack? And what lessons do you give us?
Well, a tractorcade on a city now and then helps. Wow, that's a tough question. I just presumed that existed, but I did not know that.
I'm not trying to say it's negative. It's just that
No, I
often
understand
as our parliamentary secretary would often find, we're maybe at the little kids table when we think we should be at the big boys table with all the issues and the opportunities that our industry gets to offer.
Well, I'll give a few things. Maybe it's Public Affairs 101. I know the president, there's some habits that we have. When the president pardons the turkeys for our U.S. Thanksgiving, it's done on the White House lawn. The Easter egg roll that Eleanor Roosevelt started in the 1930s. Well, those are eggs that come from somebody's farm, so the U.S. Egg Association plays in that. When we had ag on the mall, I don't think the president came out, but many other people did, and you got to play and drive a tractor and do those kinds of things. So, and I think the voting bloc, at least the image of that out in rural America, means something to a president, particularly in a very divisive, divided Congress. But I'll think about that and get back to you.
Okay.
Maybe
good.
we should count our blessings more than I have been.
Yeah. Let's move to your new job.
Yeah.
You are currently you are the CEO of NASDA, which is the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture.
Right.
What is it, and what do you do?
Well, if you all took your provincial ministers of ag and formed an association with anybody who leads a province, leads ag in a province, you would have NASDA Canadian style. Mexico has AMSDA. They're all secretaries down in the states of Mexico. We have three titles. It's either a secretary of ag, a commissioner of ag, and a director of ag. I was a director because I was appointed.
When you were in Indiana.
Many of the commissioners are elected in their own right. We have 12 states that elect their own secretary or commissioner. About right now, 40%, 35, 40% of them are Democrat, the rest are Republican, and every 2 years that could switch a little bit. But it's the darndest thing, and it was one of the reasons I wanted to join them. I'd known NASDA and been a sponsor since 1994, so I knew NASDA cold, and then I was on the board when I was director in Indiana. But it's the darndest thing. We have Democrats and we have Republicans that come together, and you cannot tell the political stripes. Last year we had our policy session. We had 3 consecutive sessions of 2-hour policy sessions, 2 at a time. And you could go in and you could not tell who comes from a Democratic state, who's elected as a Republican or Democrat. And so we've been fortunate for some reason to be able to retain that we're all for ag. We're not for one party or the other. We're all for ag. Now things can creep in. Proposition 12 might be a good example, and other things creep in. And each region has its own tone and tenor. But gosh darn it, we're lucky to have that. And so we're working that for all we can. I mean, that's why we're doing so much more international. We're finding people beating a path to our door because, you mean I can go talk to somebody that has agreement on policy issues, on ag, ranging from workforce and labor to AI to animal welfare to you name it. So it's kind of uncanny, and we're working that. In fact, I'd leave with you, I hope Canada will start an association like that. We encouraged them at our Trinational Accord, which was held in Saskatoon last September or October. No, it was July. Thank you for moving that up, by the way. Better weather. I think you'd benefit from that. It's not so expensive. And when we get together, and by the way, I have a vision of forming up an association that's international. Then the state departments of ag would have standing at COP28 or Codex. And there's always going to be strong relations with the feds. I know that can be tense at times, but we're very careful. We'll tell our friends at the federal level what we think, and behind closed doors, we'll really tell them what we think, and we'll be the first to applaud publicly when we see something done right. But we remind them, look, we're the closest thing to the farmer and the rancher and the processor you got. And we regulate them. It's not the EPA and FDA and USDA. They hand that off to the state departments of ag to do that, as you do with your provincial ministries, at least much of it. So that's what we're trying to build, and the voice is rising, and the brand is good, and we want to keep it that way. I'd like to say we take pride in getting along with everybody, and only behind closed doors will we be honest, direct, and, well, sometimes really honest and direct.
It's kind of interesting to see that agriculture is a link that can bring divisive parties together, and that's what you're saying. That's good. I applaud you on that.
Well, I would say that the one thing that we all hold true to is that we're always looking first through a farmer or rancher's eyes. I'll give you an example. It was about a dozen years ago that the Food and Drug Administration came out with FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, which basically is designed to get out and keep out any pathogens from produce, and then later they added feed, animal feed. And FDA, I don't want to be dictatorial here, but sometimes they felt like the best way to teach that was to, by example, you're now being penalized, here's a gazillion-dollar fine, and all kinds of penalties. And we said, no, if you're going to work with us, if we're going to do it, it's going to be educate first and then regulate. Now, I don't mean educate for years. I mean, it's one visit to the farm. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the sheets you'll see. Next time, it's for real. It was we finally prevailed, I think.
That's good.
So that's an example.
We're getting to the end of our time, but a few more questions. First off, I suspect that in your days you did a bit of lobbying. I
Yes.
suspect you have been lobbied lots.
Yes.
I suspect that lots of farm groups have come and knocked on your door.
Yes.
What do we do good? Give us some tips on how to be better lobbyers.
Always be honest and transparent. When I was there, and I think because I had known so many of these people, remember I had the industry affairs job and a corporate, so I knew all the associations in Washington. I think we had a trust that started out easy. But if somebody came in and there was sizzle, glitz, and flash and brilliance, they were coached to change their tune. I wanted to just hear it straight up. I was going to be their best, biggest advocate, but tell me the problem as you have it, and I'll be very honest in return. You know, sometimes we got PowerPoints on how we were to say things. I never use PowerPoints again. Of course I'm going to support the administration, of course. But I'm not going to do it if it's going to be fake. And that's what I think I was so proud of my colleagues. That's why I went to Des Moines for my buddy Bill Northey's funeral, because he was the consummate real person. And I think ag here does that. I've met many of your people. I've known the Canola Council of Canada, the cattlemen, soy. I mean, I've not met anybody in ag up here that wouldn't be the same. And so I would just say keep doing what you're doing because you're real, it's authentic, your problems are real, people want to help in that.
Do we complain too much?
No. When I was director of ag in Indiana and then undersecretary, problems were supposed to come to you. You know, you're not going to come when everything's happy and gleeful and choice. So I think we knew the job was to deal with that. Oh, maybe sometimes. I do remember, though, that when I got a thank you letter, thank you for X, that really meant something. So maybe an occasional or a more frequent thank you on the back end when it does happen. Because, you know, we're so busy, we going down the road, oh, thank gosh, that's done, next thing. Let's deal with the next problem. Well, a thank you is very appreciated, but that never got in the way. I knew people meant it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Let's conclude with the future. What scares you?
Populism, growing lack of interest in trade, sometimes emanating from populism, sometimes other war and strife. I am very concerned about, you know, the desire on some countries to, you know, be the self-proclaimed leaders of the world. If we do that, please slap me silly, because I hope we do it by example and not because, you know, we're bullying. But mostly I think we've been so comfortable for so long. You know, we have been without war and strife for so very long that maybe that awful cycle is coming back as it's tended to over the millennia. So that's some of it.
What
Oh, and
scares
the
you
fact
about-
that there are so few that know how agriculture really works. And that's why I encourage every farmer to get a YouTube account and just tell your story. Those would
What-
be some things.
What excites you about agriculture?
Oh, innovation. Innovation and the next generation. We got to get the workforce right, and that's why we're doubling down on 4-H and FFA, and we hope we can get our immigration system fixed. But when I meet, and by the way, that's why I helped recruit National FFA, both its center and its convention, to Indianapolis. We just broke a record, 73,000. We're getting people from urban. The largest FFA chapters in the nation are New York City, Indianapolis, Chicago, Philly, LA. It's not rural Americana. And they may not go straight to the crops and the critters, maybe greenhouse and, contained greenhouse type agriculture or lawn mowing businesses. But gosh, they've become familiar with ag as I've known it, the food and ag part that I like. And so I'm really very, very bullish on that. And I'm bullish on relationships. When we come together like we are here today, and like I've known so many of those of you who in Canada that have come down to Washington, or this is my third trip to Ottawa. We've got to keep that going. And that's why NASDA is so intent on doing much more foreign outreach, is we've got to establish a cadence of trust so that they might think twice before they want to screw you for whatever the reason that might be.
In this country, Ted, we spell agri-food interestingly.
Yes, you do. I'm glad you capped the F. I noticed that.
And did you notice that there's a hyphen in between? And often I find that we operate like an agriculture or we operate like food. But too often that hyphen is a mountain. And this mountain does need to come down so that we have a bridge, because the consumer wants an agri-food industry. They want to know more
Yes, they
about
do.
our agri-food industry, about how agriculture, our crops are growing, how the food is growing. They want to know more about that. We got to work together.
You gonna drop the hyphen, Kim?
No, I'm going to
No?
say it's a
Okay.
bridge.
It's
I'm
a
going to
bridge.
make it a bridge.
Oh, I'll pick that up.
Okay.
I'll be right with you on that.
And I'd say as a nation that depends as much as we do on the U.S. and as much as we do on exports, we have the opportunity to be a bridge in agriculture that is a bridge for Canadian agriculture can be a bridge for many things that makes this country better and makes this thing good. We have that opportunity. That's the opportunity that I see.
Well, I buy it. I'm with you. I'll add that to my lexicon of phrases and metaphors and all the other things we talk about.
So we got a great audience here tonight. We got standing room. We got a couple of reserved that in here, but basically we have a huge crowd. What's the one message you want to leave with them?
Can I have two?
Two.
When we work together, 1 + 1 can equal 3, and sometimes if we're really good, 4, 5, or 6. And my best example was Codex. It was majestic. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we should address problems we have, but we can't be petty about it, and we can't do so forgetting all that is so very, very good about the relationship, because we do have that. So I think I'd end in, and then I got to plug. I mean, we're here with CAAIN. I can't say I'm a huge fan of innovation and not talk about it. Wow, is it going to solve problems in the world? We have pigs that are African swine fever resistant. We have vaccines that are high-path avian flu resistant. Oh my gosh, the agriculture like my brother is using on the farm is so different than when I grew up, and I'm not that old. So I got to plug innovation too.
Well, thank you, Ted McKinney. Thank
you.
I believe you met all the criteria. I think you were interesting.
Well, I always go for a C+ or better.
C+
Did I get a
or better.
Okay, all right.
I think you got, you shared some thoughts and some insights that are going to allow us to ponder and think. I think you made for a very enjoyable evening. I didn't see anybody snooze snoozing off as we were doing here. And it's been a long day for many.
That's because you know all of them. They know you.
So I think it also set us up for tomorrow in the Future of Food event. And related to that, thank you, Farm Credit Canada, for your continued leadership to be able to allow us to bring these things together, to allow us to celebrate tomorrow being Canada's Agriculture Day, to be able to do that. So thank you for that. I also, as we turn things back to Daryl to turn things over, I want to also say thank you, CAAIN, for hosting us and allowing us to that. There's not a doubt in my mind that you're going to drive the adoption of ag technology in Canada. Thank you very much, audience. You've been a wonderful group to be with you, and I look forward to seeing you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the great discussion and knowledge transfer. Truly appreciate it. Heard opportunities for collaboration, understanding, and of course innovation, which is near and dear to CAAIN. All of that is near and dear to CAAIN. Thank you. I know Ted and Kim will be sticking around for refreshments after, for appetizers. So if you want to chat, feel free to reach out and connect with them there, or please enjoy the networking opportunity that follows. I want to remind you of something very important. There is a drink ticket in your name tag, so please enjoy that as well. And for those of you who would like to see a recording of tonight's discussion, or perhaps for someone who wasn't here and would like to see it, we are posting it on our network website. That's network.cain.ca, network.cain.ca. And of course, we encourage all of you to join that. It's free. The larger the membership, the greater the value it provides. Now, thank you for sharing your time with us, and we truly appreciate the support here, and we hope to see all of you at the Future of Food tomorrow. Thank you. Take care.